a very holy area. And I'm so happy to be back here and working on what I'm passionate about, which is disrupting and changing what we call capitalism into social beneficial capitalism. And I have a white paper on it, or I like to call it an open paper because anyone can go in there and edit or mess up and I have to go back and undo their mess up, right? It's at socapism.com. But I prefer more people like work on it. Very few people mess it up, but that's fine. It's an open paper, right? And you can always go back to the history and fix it. Anyway, I want to talk about how do we get to social beneficial capitalism. But before we get there, we have to define terms. Capitalism can be very simply defined as private property and kind of the act of business. But I don't define capitalism that way. Capitalism to me is the foundation, which is the business model. And the foundation of business model is built on something called compounded annual growth rate, CAGR. CAGR, in turn, drives something called ROI. So if I have a business idea, I have to show an investor that it has a potential to do a return for their investment. So it has to show CAGR. And CAGR then shows ROI. And then there's all the proof metrics and everything else that ties into these financial documents. And ultimately, what happens is these rich individuals, fund this idea that then grows up, meet expectations, crosses the chasm, which is this tough area, right? Crossing the chasm. For example, Amazon was in debt for billions of years, but they were reaching the metrics. And then once you cross the chasm, you pretty much own it. And your funding, what do you do with your funding? It's called the wealth and power cycle. You buy politicians, you change legislation, you basically corrupt democracy, and you change laws. You put in someone like Trump to dismantle, things that cost you money. And this is the vicious cycle that we have, which causes climate change, which causes a deforestation, which causes the sixth great extinction, all these things. Every crisis facing our planet can be traced to our business model. You could say the startup. The startup is what launched Wall Street. Every idea pretty much started as a startup, either internally or externally. When internally, it means it came out of an existing company which had funding that could launch it and everything else, or externally, like something like Facebook, started a university. So until you come to the realization that our entire problem facing climate change and everything, all of these things are just an outcome of an endemic problem, right? An endemic problem versus systemic problem. Endemic means it's inherently flawed within the system. And I recognized this back in 2000 and around 2010, 2011, when I started saying, is the startup broken? If so, how would I fix it? I started thinking about fixing, and then all of a sudden Occupy Wall Street happened. I said, wait a minute, guys, it's not about Wall Street. It's the thing before that. Unless we fix the startup, we can't fix anything. So then I realized I can't really go to Wall Street and tell them to fix it, and you need a sandbox. See, this is what Vitalik can't explain to you. How did he come up with the blockchain, Ethereum, right? The whole idea of the blockchain is a new sandbox that is decentralized and outside of this current sandbox that we have. And we have now DeFi, we have all this decentralized exchanges, we have all this whole new financial system, right? But it's still crippled onto this original system, right? And so the outcome that I thought back in 2010 was this, is like, if we can change the sandbox and launch something I called back then an open corporation or open organization that had everyone who was a customer, everyone that is a collaborator, and everyone that's a creator would be part of it. We call these things DAOs now, decentralized autonomous organizations. And these entities are governed by its stakeholders, these people involved. There is no board of directors. This is all 18th century. This is, the corporation is an 18th century vehicle that we need to replace. So imagine then, I thought, imagine if we replaced these shareholders with stakeholders. Imagine if instead of a triangle where the customer's at the bottom, we have an inverted triangle. And you can see my talks back in 2011, 12 on it. I have open corporation. You can look at my Dow talks back then, inverted. And started with an idea. So how does an idea become the next Google outside of the current economic framework that we have right now? The token. Just as Bitcoin, 18 million Bitcoin have been released since its career, or 19 million now, maybe 18.5, whatever, 19, are in circulation since it began. And when it began, it was worth 0. And now it's worth 50 million each. The total value is $1 trillion. So imagine if Bitcoin was a company, right? Was this idea? It is an idea. And who controls Bitcoin? No one controls Bitcoin. Everyone together who owns Bitcoin has consensus. The miners and everything else have consensus in it. No one controls it. No one can turn it off. Well, maybe with an EMP. So I want you to take a logical step that if Bitcoin can have value, if a meme token coin, Dogecoin, right, can have value of 5 cents each, if Litecoin can add value $200 each, then the potentiality is for anything created like them that mimics them has the potential to have value like them as long as the network would grow. So I want you to imagine a new type of world, okay? I want you to imagine instead of a startup that gets privately funded and launched and controlled by a few, and we're seeing this also on the blockchain, right? You have an individual. An individual has a dream to change the world or become president. And people believe in that dream. And he has a token, just like Bitcoin. And by those participating around them and interacting with them, they earn this token. And how they earn this token is through machine learning, right? Algorithms that creates value on your participation. I call it proof of benefit. So if you are benefiting and being proactive and benefiting this token, then you earn more of the pool, right, of it. So we can use AI to determine the benefit, and we can set what we think is good society, good benefit on there. And it's obviously every culture will have different changes, and the AI would adapt to those cultures and those changes. But in the simplest term, participation, sharing, interacting, promoting. Imagine if you bought a product, and in the traditional sense, let's say I'm on Facebook, I am the product. But in the future, imagine if you are valued, your token value, your value is built into this token that is not just held by you, but held by those around you. So you can either spend or motivate receiving of those tokens because you believe in those tokens. You want to gather more of those tokens, right? You want to get more, just like the initial founders of Bitcoin. They believed and they gathered as much Bitcoin as they did. Some of the fools sold them for jacuzzis, sold them for a pizza, and so on. I'm guilty. I have $1 million laptop. So, $1 million laptop. And that was only from a couple of years ago, from 2016, October of 2016. So I'm guilty too. $1 million laptop. Daniel has it. So DeSoto, one of the founders of Ethereum Classic. But anyway, so if you imagine a world where you change simple thing as Kagger to Cabber, you change um, the outcome of these startups, right? And the thing, it doesn't have to be a startup, it could be a person, it could be an idea, into having value. The starting point of that is this open tokenization framework. We cannot change the world. We can't bring about the change as long as we are still on the nipple of fiat currencies and still have on there. And we can't, and the way that we currently have the tokenization framework, they've got tokenization services, is someone centralized wants you to pay them to create a token. We have to make it stupid simple, so simple that anyone, anywhere, no matter where they are, can make a Bitcoin-like token that mimics Bitcoin and mimics Bitcoin in the scarcity. It mimics it in the time frame. I put actually more restriction on that, but I could see this as being something that could be customized and changed. But until we have this framework, and what will happen, right? If it happens, if there are three of these decentralized tokens, there's really just three of them, and all of them have value, then it's projects that any token that's released over a course of 10 years is going to have value, right? Why wouldn't it? Because the token represents me and my participation. And, and the key to the whole process is the AI or the noodle or O2O2. That is the key because you need a manager. You need an independent manager, and you need one that basically is doing the proof of benefit calculation. And the calculation needs to be agreed upon by the community in which it is launching. So we can bring about social beneficial capitalism. We can bring it about quickly, but what we need to do first is usher in the open tokenization framework that allows anyone simply to tokenize themselves, their product, their idea, their music, no matter what. And when someone interacts with that person, that idea, that music, by liking, by sharing, by following, by sponsoring, then they receive a portion of that token out of the pool, and it keeps on flowing. And then when they stop participating, they stop getting it. But a collaborator also gets it. So the collaborator, if I, as a creator of the token, I assign a collaborator, then that collaborator also can benefit. As a creator, I'm always getting some. Not as much as the consumer, not as much as the collaborator, but I'm always getting some of it. But that provides the incentive because I am I'm the believer in the token that I have, that I want to, hey, I'll give you my swag for my tokens back. I want to collect because I believe in them as much as I can, and I don't have control over them. The network does. So unless the network grows, I don't. So it's kind of like saying anyone who starts a YouTube channel, you cannot know that they're going to be a big YouTube, right? Anyone who launches a token, you don't know which are the ones that will launch. And that to me is exciting. So I hope this talk is of interest to you. Hope you'll ask me questions. You go to foundups.org. I develop, I am putting basically all of it out there. If someone wants to develop this token before me, great. I am putting it in the Creative Commons. You can't launch an ICO with my work or anything else because it's not for profit, whatever the S with the line through it, not monetary, right? So, and it doesn't matter if you launch something similar. This has to be, the token has to be, has to work like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, right? But why can't I have the Mike token or the Jones token or whatever token? It also needs to launch on any blockchain, right? People ask me, why aren't you picking Ethereum? Well, go try swap 2 Ethereum ERC20 tokens and tell me why, right? Ethereum is broken, right? You know, it's antiquated. It was the first one, and there's a lot of hype behind it because it's number 2, but it's broken, and maybe it'll get fixed. Charles with Cardano, and with Cardano, we may fork it and start our own OTC Cardano. We may use it, right? I don't know yet. It's not my decision. You know, it depends on what the cost is to create the tokens and everything else. We may have to start from scratch, which means we may need the price of tokens to be so cheap that we need to fork Cardano. And then every time they fork, we just fork on it. Let them do the work, and we just fork on it, and they add all the technology to it, and we just kind of have a separate one. You know, I don't know. You know, it means that every person who is a delegate on Cardano, when we fork it, they ultimately can run the nodes with ours and double their Cardano. I mean, I'm just throwing this out. I don't know that we're going to do this, but this is a potential option. And we may look at something else on it. But I think Cardano is the one, right? Cardano, a vehicle for launching Danos. Danos are decentralized autonomous organizations. On this framework, when you tokenize an idea, right, or even an individual, after 10 years, what happens? Well, it evolves into this Dano or DAO. In essence, the AI is creating these, every time you create a token, it's creating a kind of DAO. And these DAOs initially for the first 10 years are kind of in like startup mode, early adoption. Once they reach that early adoption, that's in 10 years, those that reach that all of a sudden kind of bounce out into their new thing. And what happens then is there's an event called an open public offering, OPO, where the tokens that are being held by the fund are released, and anyone can bid on those tokens that have been held by the Bitcoin Global Reserve Fund, or the AI, because the AI is always also getting tokens all the time, right? So the AI is getting tokens, and the AI is also then taking those tokens, auctioning them off, and then taking the proceeds and converting into Satoshi. So I just want to play with a mental image here of 1 million tokens out there, 1 billion tokens, 100 million tokens being produced out here, right, on all different networks. They're all tied together with the, you know, they're all OTFs, right? Open Tokenization Framework. They're all OTF tokens, right? And these OTF tokens are constantly just kind of, you know, gobbling up Satoshi, just always, every day. You imagine just like siphoning off pennies off a bank, right? Just always, right? So all Bitcoin, all this foundation Bitcoin eventually is going to get into this Bitcoin Global. And there right here is the AI, the noodle, right? Managing all of these OTFs around it. So the big challenge I had is, how do you move Bitcoin from here to here? Well, it's with the creation of these tokens. And who wouldn't want a token? I would. If you could create a Bitcoin token with your name on it and work it, would you do it? You didn't need to code it, it just automatically did it. And if you didn't need to mine and it would build onto your network, would you be, would be excited to do it? Sure, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I think 1 million other people would too. And so anyway, how do we end capitalism? Well, in ushering social beneficial capitalism, well, we start by creating the Open Tokenization Framework, which then leads to a new kind of entity called a DAO, or a DANO, Decentralized Autonomous Nonprofit Organization, where if you think of these tokens, they become kind of like a UBI. You spend your 10 years promoting and growing, and all of a sudden they cash in and they're worth something. You got 1,000 of them and they're worth 10,000 each, right? It's not bad, just for doing something you're passionate and you love. And then ultimately, because of this fund, it releases a stable coin called UPS, found UPS. And imagine now, because the AI releases it, it's not owned by me, not owned by the AI, it's just owned by managed by the AI. And all of a sudden you're picking up garbage, and cha-ching, You found ups in the garbage. All of a sudden you're doing it, the algorithm determines what you're doing is good. You're helping an old lady across the road. Cha-ching, you hear a cha-ching, you know the sound. You just found ups. You just found ups because of doing good, of being a good society. So we reward people, right? For benefiting others, benefiting, smile, helping, sharing, or service to others. That's undoubted due to you.